All right, so this is week 10. Obviously, this is the last week here before we move into all of you coming back into school for hybrid. No summative at all this week. We're going to have basically 4 formative assessments. Day 1, please check into the Google Meet, even if you're a day B or you're a day B student. We'll start off talking about some of the vocabulary in this new unit with the rise of imperialism, and you'll have a little quiz that you take. And then we'll actually start doing together this imperialism cartoon analysis. So I'll kind of guide people through. There's 3 cartoons you have to do the origin, purpose, value, limitation for. And some of those cartoons might be a little bit difficult to understand if you've never really looked at imperialism. And then day 2, those of you that are A students will work on this on your own. But if you need some help or some guidance, this is a reading assignment. So if you open this up, there is a set of questions that go along with this poem. Now, this poem is entitled White Man's Burden, and it connects a lot with what we talked about earlier in the year with the idea of manifest destiny. And manifest destiny actually originated in Britain, and it was a big part of how basically the British justified their imperialism around the world, which they were doing in the 1800s, very similar when the U.S. is expanding westward. And so essentially this became something that was known as the white man's burden. And this poem, which we'll read together, basically talks about how this was this burden of kind of a religious undertone, and then this idea that this was a God-given right to go around and expand that European heritage and history around the world. Well, White Man's Burden became the call of the late 19th and early 20th century as the United States starts to become imperial and starts going to places like Cuba and the Philippines and Hawaii, and ultimately using a combination of this kind of Anglo-Saxon racist belief to justify them going into these countries and allegedly bringing them democracy and freedom. And so we're gonna talk about this specifically on that day. So if this poem is a little confusing to you, I definitely suggest that you check in and talk to us or listen to me about some of these questions and what this poem is talking about. And that's something that we will work on together. Otherwise, the biggest thing that you're going to want to kind of work on is this document analysis assignment that is at the bottom of the Schoology page. Basically what you're going to be doing is choosing 3 cartoons that really go along with these ideas of the white man's burden. So these imperialism cartoons are cartoons that question some of the U.S.'s imperialism, but also puts it into a context with looking at how the British and other European countries are also kind of following the same set. So you have to understand that this is the time period where the United States is starting to become involved in world affairs. Prior to this, they were very much isolated. They kind of stuck to their own internal domestic issues, and then also in conflict with like Mexico and then the Civil War. Well, once we get into the late 1800s, now the United States is expanding beyond their borders. And this is going a little slow today. But basically, with you open up this document, it's going to take you to a set of cartoons that are all dealing with imperialism. And we're going to go through all of them specifically. For this assignment, there's 5. You only need to answer the questions for 3. And so for each one, there's a set of questions. And so the idea here is that you kind of go through and you try to answer the questions that you know the best. And there aren't as specific as OPBL. Some of the questions are a little bit kind of redundant, and they kind of copy themselves again, especially for certain cartoons that are similar. So again, there's 5 of them, and you only have to do 3 of those. And it's taken a little while for these pictures to open up, but these are basically the questions. All right, and we will go through those together. So again, this is another formative assignment. There's no summative this week. We will eventually have at least one more summative this trimester over those last couple weeks when we do get into hybrid. But again, week 12, the last week when we normally do finals, that's the week when you're going to get your checklist and spend most of your time going back and completing things maybe you missed while we were in distance. or just improve upon certain things if you want higher scores. All right. If you have any questions, please send me a message.